Today we will take an in-depth look at the new Flydigi Vader 4 Pro, a gamepad everyone's been waiting for after the success of Vader 3. Flydigi promises numerous improvements, adjustable joystick tension, a new rebound system, and ultra-low latency with a 1000 Hz polling rate. But is everything really as good as it sounds? Hello everyone, I'm Anna Punch, and today we will conduct a thorough analysis of the Vader 4 Pro, including testing the actual latency of buttons and joystick using the GPDL tester. Spoiler alert! The joystick have higher latency than the buttons. This won't be an ordinary review. We will delve into truly important technical details. You will learn about the real input latencies of the Vader 4, the behavior of joysticks in different modes, and their impact on input lag. We will also disassemble the gamepad to see what's inside. Ready for a technical deep dive? Let's begin! Visually, the Vader 4 Pro is almost identical to the Vader 3 Pro. It's an asymmetrical gamepad with an Xbox layout, featuring 2 additional programmable buttons on the front right side and a pleasant D-pad that's a joy to press, especially when compared to the Xbox controller. On the back, there is a switch for connection modes between receiver, Bluetooth, and Nintendo Switch. I love this approach to switching between modes. There are also 4 additional control buttons that can be configured to duplicate existing buttons or perform sequential actions as macros. But the most pleasant feature here is the trigger switches, allowing you to press them instantly with a clear click, similar to the mouse button. At the bottom, there are 2 traditional contacts for the charging station, which I personally use to output button contacts for my latency tests. At the top, like the Vader 3, there is a Type-C port and a rail for attaching a clip to mount a mobile phone. The clip is not included. Vader 4 weighs exactly the same as an Xbox Series controller with an official battery. Everything I've just listed is also present in the Vader 3, except one feature – adjustable joystick tension. This feature isn't new, it was already implemented in the Apperance 4. However, in the Vader 4, they made it more accessible through external rings around the joystick. When rotated to the right, the joystick becomes tighter and has a strong, springy sound. When rotated to the left, it becomes softer to the point where it offers almost no resistance. The rings themselves rotate quite tightly, so there will be no change in sensitivity if you accidentally touch the ring. But personally, I don't like the fact that there is no ratchet effect when rotating, which would provide a clear mechanical click like this. However, this ring do produce some sound. If you start shaking the gamepad, you can hear that they are not tightly secured and become a source of additional noise. But all of this can be fixed with modifications, especially if you have a 3D printer. But that's already a level for advanced geeks. Before testing the gamepad, or doing any checks, or even just playing with it, make it a rule to update the firmware and calibrate it. This should always be done immediately after purchase. To update the firmware, we will need the Flydigi Space Station program. After connecting the gamepad via cable or receiver, an interface will open where you should select Update in the upper right corner. And if it's available, wait for the program to upload it to the gamepad. Immediately after updating, the gamepad should be calibrated. In Flydigi, this is done with the Select plus Start plus Up combination. Then rotate the joystick 3 times around their axis clockwise and fully press the triggers twice. When finished, place the gamepad on a flat surface and press Select plus Start plus Up again. This procedure can be also repeated if your calibration was unsuccessful. The joystick does not have an internal dead zone, and even the slightest touch sets it in motion. This option is fully controlled programmatically, and if necessary, the dead zone can be increased. But considering that Vader 4 has automatic correction of the central position that prevents drift, I don't see any sense in this. Unlike the Vader 3 Pro, the Vader 4 has a large outer dead zone of 1.2 mm for the joysticks. This is twice as large as its predecessor. And if we consider that the entire range of joystick movement from the center to the extreme position is 5.5 mm, this means minus 22% of the useful range. In other words, a fifth of the joystick movement is simply taken up by the dead zone. And this is a lot. Because of this, you will reach the extreme position programmatically much faster than in the Vader 3. Which is why, with Vader 4, if the aim control seems less controllable and more jerky to you, it's not just your imagination. By the way, I've been doing measurements for a long time using special rings of different thicknesses, which allow limiting the joystick movement to the side. And these rings helps me to determine the size of the outer dead zone. I printed all these rings on a 3D printer, and if anyone is interested, I've left a link to them in the description. I'll immediately answer the question: can the outer dead zone be fixed programmatically somehow? Theoretically, yes. In the space station settings, there is even a function responsible for this. But despite the fact that it seemingly has both increase and decrease of the dead zone, only the increase works correctly. The decrease does not occur no matter what mark you choose. So we need to wait for a firmware update to fix this. But it is not certain. The joystick resolution in Vader 4 has become higher than in Vader 3. Now the joystick can register up to 2000 movement position from the center to the edge. Additionally, in the settings, there is now an option to choose the joystick bitness yourself. And judging by my research, which I will show later in this video, this bitness is real, without fake intermediate position as it was in Vader 3. The ring methodology helps not only to detect the size of the outer dead zone, but also to see the asymmetry of the joystick. This is a new testing method that, unlike the test circularity, shows the real symmetry of the joystick without limiting algorithm when it's deflected by 80% in each direction. This test is done with a 1.2 mm clip and shows the shape of the circle that the joystick draws. Ideally, it should be round, but in some gamepads it can be rhombus or square. And in the Vader 3 Pro, the asymmetry was quite good. Yes, it's rhomboid, but with sufficient margins from the edge and good symmetry. But in Vader 4, everything is different. Due to the huge outer dead zone, it's impossible to see the shape of the blue circle with a 1.2 mm margin, at least in the cable or receiver connection mode. But in Bluetooth connection mode, everything changes. The outer dead zone of Vader 4 becomes smaller, and we can finally see the blue circle and its shape. And yes, it's much worse than in Vader 3 in the same mode. It has not the best symmetry, especially the left joystick with a deviation of 9.4%. And it resembles a rhombus even more instead of a circle. I'm sure this can also be fixed with firmware someday. But for now, we have what we have. Flydigi gamepads have two modes of operation with an external circle. In raw mode, the pointer will go beyond the outer circle, giving an error of up to 14%. But if you activate circle mode, the error is completely eliminated and amounts to only 0.1%, making the circle perfect. The accuracy of the central position has improved. Now the pointer of the stationary joystick stops closer to the center, which allows reducing the inner dead zone in games. Unlike Vader 3 and even Apex 4, Flydigi Vader 4 Pro has a separate tab for joystick processing, where you can change not only its polling rate, but also bitness. You can also add additional behavior algorithms. Joystick debounce removes joystick tremor in a stationary position. Without this parameter, the joystick will constantly display micro movements that I call tremor. By activating debounce, the pointer will display a change in coordinates only when there is actual joystick movement. I recommended activating this parameter as it does not create input latency and also allows activating joystick automatic calibration. Joystick automatic calibration will align the central position of the joystick pointer every 5 seconds, which allows avoiding unwanted drift in games with a small dead zone. By the way, the same option is available by default in Apex 4 and Vader 3. This algorithm also does not create additional input latencies. But keep in mind that it does not work via Bluetooth, only through cable or receiver. Joystick accuracy allows changing the joystick bitness, increasing its resolution. For example, at 8 bits the joystick will be able to register 125 positions, while 10 bits allows you to get about 500 stick positions when moving from the center to the edge. Most players will have enough with 8 bits, but you can feel free to choose any parameter, considering that this indicator does not affect latency at all. Joystick polling rate allows you to specify how often the gamepad will transmit data about its joystick position. This indicator already affects latency and even battery consumption. At a frequency of 125 Hz, the latency via receiver in X-input mode is whole 70 milliseconds, while at a frequency of 1000 Hz, it's already 25 milliseconds. Therefore, of course, for greater speed, it's better to choose 100 Hz. Joystick center sensitivity remains an unclear parameter for me personally at the time of writing this video. Write in the comments if you already figure out how it works, because I personally didn't notice a difference in either behavior or joystick latencies in all 3 modes in this parameter. Joystick rebounds algorithm allows you to always stop the stick in the center position. To see how this works, I activated the fade mode in the joystick tester program. On the left, you see an example without rebounds, and on the right, with it. But I don't recommend using rebounds at all, since it increases the joystick input latency from 25 to 32 milliseconds, so it's better to keep this parameter turned off. On your screen right now, you see the optimal settings for your joystick configs. I recommend setting everything the same way and never coming back here again. Calculating joystick bitness can be done both programmatically and visually. It's enough to start moving the joystick to the side and watch the coordinates of the joystick position. In ideal conditions, for each micro movement, we should get one change in joystick position. But in case of Vader 3, each movement is accompanied by spam from several positions, which does not allow the program to correctly calculate the real bitness of the joystick. But Vader 4 Pro finally does not have this problem, because every movement in the stick physically corresponds to a program movement. This works so perfectly that during the liner test in the stick analyzer program, we literally have an ideal correlation between how we move the joystick and what we get in the program, which I personally consider an impressive result that shows that the new joystick design is a step in the right direction of development. Comparison of these two graphs speaks for itself. The joystick of Vader 4 Pro have become better. To better understand the controller and test input latencies, it should be disassembled. Here, with Vader 4 Pro, everything is the same as with Vader 3. It's enough to unscrew 4 screws with a PH1 screwdriver on the back part and pry open the case using a special plastic tool that I use to disassemble 99% of all gamepads. I will leave a link to such a tool in the description under the video. Inside, everything is quite neat. There is no unpleasant smell or traces of unwashed flux, and all components can be easily disconnected without a soldering iron. The body design exactly copies the Vader 3, except for the joystick regulators. The principle of joystick adjustment here is quite simple. A large gear rotates a smaller one, which makes a joystick stiffer or softer. The joysticks themselves can be easily disconnected by unscrewing 5 small screws from the back of the board. And here is what the joystick itself looks like. As you can see, there is no electronics here, only mechanical movement parts and 2 magnets that affect 2 Hall sensors located on the board. This is a very unusual joystick design that I've never seen before, and I'm very pleased with the fact that Flydigi is creating something new, something of their own. In this form, I have full access to the joystick and buttons contacts, which now makes it easy to test the gamepad's input latency with a GPDL tester in all modes. For more details on how to use a GPDL tester, you can watch a separate video on my channel. You can make such a tester by yourself or order it using the link in the pinned comment. At the time of writing this script, Vader's 4 latencies were terrible, almost twice as bad as Vader 3. On the gamepadla.com website, these tests were already available, which outraged many users, and some of them started writing letters of complaints to Flydigi, and it worked! Literally, within 2 days, Flydigi rolled out a new firmware 6930, in which they significantly improved the latency results, and moreover, they checked them with a GPDL tester. So you can thank John Punch, who developed this tester, by subscribing to his Ko-fi.com page. Link in the pinned comment. This device connects directly to the gamepad contacts and simulates pressing A button or deflection at joystick and repeats this action 2000 times, calculating the minimum, average and maximum latencies. When pressing the A button, the average latency of Vader 4 Pro via cable in X input mode was 5.31 milliseconds, via receiver 8.44 milliseconds, and via Bluetooth 21.39 milliseconds. These are excellent indicators that even surpass the level of the most expensive gamepad, Flydigi Apex 4. But is the joystick latency of the gamepad equally fast? Let's check. Starting from today, the GPDL tester can also test gamepad joystick latency. To do this, it's sufficient to connect one contact to the Hall sensor and the other to the ground. And in the testing program, select a special mode for joystick. Thanks for this, we have the opportunity for the first time to see the difference between button and joystick latency. Via receiver, the average joystick latency in X input mode was 26 milliseconds, which is 18 milliseconds higher than when pressing a button. Via Bluetooth, it's 24 milliseconds, which is only 3 milliseconds more than the button in the same mode. That is, yes, sticks are slower than buttons here. And this is despite the fact that in the test all additional processing modes, such as rebounds, which create a latency, were disabled. At this point, I don't have much data about joystick latency for other gamepads, as this is a new testing methodology. But for example, in the DualShock 4, the difference in latency between joystick and buttons is almost non-existent. Perhaps it's all about the potentiometer technology, or maybe the internal algorithm. This all needs to be investigated. And perhaps I will even make a separate video comparing and testing joystick latencies of the 10 most popular gamepads, if you immediately subscribe to this channel. Many of you are probably wondering why this latency data is so much higher than some other YouTube reviewers. The thing is that due to their ignorance, many people confuse input latency with polling rate and believe that the data from X input test is the gamepad latency. But in fact, these are completely different indicators. When someone tells you that the latency in a gamepad is 1 or 2 milliseconds, they are most likely confused input latency with polling rate. You can read more about this in the separate article by John Punch on Reddit, the link to which is in the pinned comment. I think at this point we can already summarize the results to understand how good the Vader 4 Pro is for buying. Let's start with the advantages. The joystick of Vader 4 Pro are great. They have no dead zones and have an automatic central point calibration function. Theoretically, they will never drift, as they have no mechanical friction due to their new design. They have high resolution that you can choose yourself, and you can turn off tremor. Additionally, new joystick settings have appeared in the proprietary software, allowing you to choose which algorithm you want to use and which one you don't. The choice of Bitness is, in my opinion, the main event in this gamepad. For comparison, the 8-bit Duo Ultimate Bluetooth controller has such low bitness that it can only register 35 joystick position when moving from center to edge, while Vader 4 allows you to get more than 2000 position at 12 bits. It's also worth nothing that the Vader series has some of the best clickers triggers on the market. In my opinion, this is even better than adaptive triggers of Apex 4. By the way, the triggers here have vibration like an Xbox Series controller, which is also a plus. Moreover, Vader 4 is a universal gamepad that works on many devices, including Nintendo Switch. It has a built-in gyroscope that can be activated even in X-input mode, thanks to setting in Space Station. I recommend trying this feature, especially for those who find it difficult to control aiming with a joystick. By the way, Vader 3 has this feature too. Another advantage is the input latency of Vader 4. It has a faster response in almost all modes, even surpassing the more expensive Apex 4. And in the cable connection mode, it is the fastest Flydigi gamepad overall. And lastly, I should probably add the adjustable joystick tension using the outer ring as an advantage. But in my opinion, this is more of a gimmick that attracts attention, but does not have much practical value. Now about the disadvantages. The main problem with Vader 4 Pro at the moment is the outer dead zone. It's huge and taking away more than 20% of useful movement in cable or receiver connection mode. But interestingly, it's smaller via Bluetooth, so it's likely this can be fixed with firmware if Flydigi wants to. Such a dead zone will negatively affect camera and aim control. Another disadvantage I consider is the exclusivity of the joystick setting tab for Vader 4. In my opinion, this functionality should be unlocked for other gamepads in the series, at least for more expensive Apex 4. It would be appropriate. But apparently, the developers decided to go the way of Huang, where you have to pay for new software features by buying new devices. Vader 4 Pro also failed the asymmetry test. Of all the Flydigi gamepads I have, Vader 4 has the worst result in terms of the shape of the middle circle. And even after several recalibrations, it's still far from the level of Vader 3. You can learn more about the asymmetry test and why it is an important parameter from John Sponge's article on Reddit. Despite improvements in input latencies for buttons in patch 6930, the joystick of Vader 4 Pro still have a latency of 26 milliseconds compared to 8 milliseconds for button. This is an acceptable result for most players, but when compared to DualShock 4, which have no difference between joystick and button latency, Vader 4 Pro falls behind. And the last disadvantage, in my opinion, is the build quality of Vader 4. I noticed that one screw does not screw in at all. This indicates a stripped threaded hole, which was not damaged by me, but was like that from the start. The Vader 4 Pro demonstrates Flydigi's innovative approach, especially in joystick design and software settings. However, some issues, such as the large outer dead zone, need to be addressed through firmware updates. For casual gamers, the Vader 4 Pro can be a good choice, especially if the price is competitive. However, for professional players of those particularly sensitive to joystick precision, there may be better alternatives. It's important to note that Flydigi is actively working on improving their product through firmware updates. Therefore, some of the identified shortcomings may be fixed in the future. I recommend keeping an eye on updates on gamepad.com or official Flydigi sources for up-to-date information about gamepad improvements. If you are interested in deeper technical analysis of gamepads, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for future reviews and comparisons. I will update all useful links and current information in the pinned comment or description under the video. And that's all for today. I'm Anna Punch. See you next time. But interestingly, yeah. But interestingly, it's smaller. But interestingly.